What comes to mind when you think of Carthage? A name whispered through the ruins of history. A city once poised to rule the Mediterranean, now remembered only for its fiery fall at the hands of Rome. But this familiar tale barely scratches the surface. To truly understand Carthage, we must journey back, far back, before its walls were ever raised, before its name echoed across seas and continents. 4 centuries before Carthage was founded, the ancient world was reeling from the catastrophic collapse of the Bronze Age. Egypt's dominance had faded. Empires crumbled into dust. Amid this chaos, the Phoenicians, brilliant sailors and traders from the Levantine coast, seized their independence. From cities like Sidon, Byblos, and especially Tyre, they launched a new age of exploration and commerce. Their sleek ships, laden with purple cloth and exotic goods, stitched together distant shores. To support their sprawling trade empire, they established over 300 colonies, from Cyprus to Spain. Most of these outposts remained loyal to their mother cities. They paid tribute, followed shared customs, and extended the Phoenician reach across oceans. Then came 814 BC, a date shrouded in myth, yet steeped in meaning. Legend tells of Princess Dido, fleeing betrayal in Tyre, who sailed with her followers to the North African coast. There, they built Carthage, New City. What began as a humble settlement of traders quickly grew into something far greater. Perched at a vital choke point of the Mediterranean, Carthage was destined for greatness. Its harbors bustled, its influence spread, and its ambitions soared. But its rise was not without enemies, nor blood. Carthage was not born in peace. It was carved from the ambitions of merchants and monarchs on a continent where only the ruthless could survive. Carthage did not simply grow. It ascended, propelled by ambition, trade, and an unrelenting will to dominate. What began as a tribute-paying outpost soon evolved into a titan of the Western Mediterranean. Its location, strategically nestled at the narrowest point between Africa and Europe, was no accident of fate. It was a gift the Carthaginians wielded with ruthless precision. By the 7th century BC, Carthage had outgrown its role as a mere colony. Trade routes expanded. Its harbors welcomed ships from Egypt, Greece, and Iberia. The city flourished, not just in wealth, but in confidence. In 650 BC, Carthage founded its own colony, Abusus, on the Balearic Islands, modern-day Ibiza. It was no longer following in Tyre's footsteps, but forging its own path. Then came 586 BC, a turning point. While Tyre fell to Babylon's siege after 13 brutal years, Carthage was rising. Under General Malchus, the Libyan tribes were crushed, and Carthage shed the last remnants of tribute and dependence. From that moment, Carthage no longer looked for protection. It offered it. It became the shield of Phoenician colonies, the enforcer of loyalty, and the barrier against Greek expansion. Power flowed inward. Authority centralized. In time, a monarchy was established under King Mago Vushra, a warrior statesman who forged a decisive alliance with the Etruscans to counter the growing menace of Greek colonists. The clash came in 539 BC at the Battle of Alalia. Carthage and Etruria joined forces to confront the Greeks off Corsica's coast. Though the Greeks claimed victory, their losses were so devastating that they abandoned the colony entirely. Carthage, meanwhile, claimed Sardinia and expanded its reach once more. What the world saw as commerce, Carthage wielded as conquest. Beneath the sails of its ships, ambition burned like fire. Glory invites risk. And for Carthage, that risk came at a devastating price. By the early 5th century BC, the western half of Sicily had become Carthage's stronghold, a critical frontier in its contest for dominance. But east of the island, the Greeks loomed, powerful, defiant, and united under Syracuse. In 480 BC, Carthage launched a bold campaign to crush the Greeks and seize control of the island once and for all. The Punic forces landed in strength. The stakes were nothing less than supremacy in the Western Mediterranean. But at the Battle of Himera, the tide turned violently against Carthage. A coalition of Greek forces struck with overwhelming precision. The Carthaginian army was shattered. Its commander, King Hamilcar, seeing no escape, chose to throw himself into the flames rather than fall into enemy hands. The loss was cataclysmic, not just militarily, but politically. Carthage, reeling from the humiliation, looked inward. It demanded accountability, reform, rebirth. The monarchy, once the symbol of unity and power, was abolished. In its place rose a republic, more rigid, more balanced, yet no less ambitious. 2 suffets, or judges, were elected annually, sharing executive power. No king, no crown, only law and the will of the elite. Power shifted to the Senate, a council of 300 of the city's wealthiest and most influential citizens. Every major policy required consensus. Every deadlock was pushed to the people. It was a system designed to avoid tyranny, but not weakness. Carthage had learned the cost of pride. Now it would rule through structure, discipline, and calculated ambition. Though the scars of Himera ran deep, Carthage endured. It retained its Sicilian foothold. It rebuilt. It watched. The Greeks had won the battle, but not the war. The fire that consumed Hamilcar would ignite a new Carthage, colder, sharper, and more determined than ever. Even in the shadows of defeat, Carthage never stood still. It expanded, adapted, and reached beyond horizons. While avoiding open war with the Greeks, it turned its gaze elsewhere, south, west, beyond the known world. Carthaginian ambition burned hotter than ever, stoked by trade, exploration, and the hunger for greatness. It was during this era that the Barcid family, visionaries and warriors, led expeditions that stunned the ancient world. Mago Barca carved paths across the Sahara, establishing trade with Egypt by land. Hanno the Navigator sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, down the West African coast, possibly as far as Mount Cameroon. He returned with tales of fire-breathing mountains and strange beasts. His brother, Himilco, ventured north, past Iberia, along the coast of Gaul, and perhaps even to the British Isles. Some claim Carthaginian ships reached the distant Azores. Ancient coins found there whisper of a reach that defied the imagination. Carthage wasn't just exploring, it was revolutionizing. In its shipyards, a marvel was born, standardized, mass-produced vessels, each piece labeled with unique symbols for rapid assembly. What took weeks in Greece or Rome took hours in Carthage. The sea, once a barrier, became a battlefield, and Carthage, its master. Yet for all its engineering brilliance, Carthage was deeply spiritual. Its destiny was written in the stars, guided by divine will. Baal Hamon, god of fire and fertility, and Tanit, fierce goddess of war and rebirth, ruled its altars. Their symbols graced every wall, their names echoed in every prayer. But faith came at a cost. In times of crisis, Carthaginians offered more than grain or gold. They offered their own blood. To outsiders, it was barbaric. To Carthage, it was sacred. A pact with the divine, a price paid for survival. Every voyage, every conquest, every battle sanctified by fire. Tension crackled like a storm on the horizon. In Sicily, a powder keg was ready to ignite, and the spark came from a band of rogue mercenaries. After seizing the city of Messana, they invited help from both Carthage and Rome. Carthage answered first. By the time Roman ships arrived, a Punic garrison held the city walls. But Rome was not there to negotiate. It was there to seize opportunity. In a ruthless twist, the Roman consul Appius Claudius lured Carthaginian Admiral Hanno into a false parley, then captured, tortured, and forced him to surrender Messana. Though his men obeyed, Carthage called it treason. Hanno was crucified, and war was declared. Thus began the First Punic War, a clash of titans that would rage for over 2 decades. Carthage ruled the sea. Rome commanded the land. But while Roman legions could dominate Sicily's battlefields, they were helpless against Carthage's swift, deadly navy. Then came a stroke of fortune. A Carthaginian warship ran aground. Roman engineers dismantled it, studied every part, and unlocked the secrets of Punic shipbuilding. In a stunning turnaround, Rome built an entire fleet, fast. But ships alone would not win the war. Carthaginians were born sailors. Romans were not. So Rome changed the rules. They invented the corvus, a brutal boarding bridge that turned naval battles into infantry brawls. No longer was finesse required, only blood and steel. As the war dragged on, Carthage bled resources. Internal unrest brewed. Mercenaries went unpaid. And still, the Romans advanced. Relentless, ruthless, unyielding. By 241 BC, Carthage could fight no more. Defeat did not come by sword, but by starvation. They signed peace. Sicily was lost. Reparations were demanded. But peace was a lie. Rome had tasted blood. And Carthage, humiliated, would not forget. The first chapter of a terrible trilogy had been written. The war had ended. The peace had not. Though Carthage survived its first clash with Rome, it emerged battered, broke, and vulnerable. Its once proud army, made up largely of foreign mercenaries, returned victorious, only to find empty coffers and no reward. Their demands for payment fell on deaf ears. Their loyalty, once bought with silver, turned to rage. What followed was not a rebellion. It was a nightmare. The Mercenary War, or as history would come to call it, the Truceless War, erupted in blood and betrayal. Mercenaries seized cities, executed officials, and marched on Carthage itself. The city, once master of the seas, was under siege by its own sword-wielding shadows. Desperation gripped the Republic. With no foreign armies left to call upon, Carthage broke an ancient taboo. It conscripted its own citizens into war. Hamilcar Barca, battle-hardened and unrelenting, rose to command. He would not negotiate. He would not forgive. As cities burned and allies faltered, the war descended into savagery. No terms were offered. No prisoners taken. Heads were stacked in pyramids. Rivers ran red. Meanwhile, chaos spread beyond Africa. In Corsica and Sardinia, unpaid garrisons joined the revolt. Carthage prepared to reclaim them, but Rome intervened, seizing both islands while Carthage bled. Humiliated and helpless, Carthage could only surrender, swallowing rage like poison. When the dust settled, Carthage stood victorious, but shattered. The war had gutted its army, drained its treasury, and exposed its fragility. Yet from that darkness, a fire rekindled. Hamilcar Barca turned westward, to Spain, a land of silver and soldiers, where Carthage would be reborn. There, amid the mines and mountains, he laid the foundation for a vengeance that would shake the Republic of Rome to its core. Carthage had survived annihilation, but it had learned. The next war would not be for survival. It would be for retribution. Carthage had licked its wounds, but it had not forgotten. In the silver-rich lands of Iberia, General Hamilcar Barca rebuilt the city's might, brick by brick, sword by sword. His vision was clear: restore Carthaginian power and prepare for the reckoning to come. When he fell in battle, that torch passed to his son-in-law, Hasdrubal, and then to his son, Hannibal, a boy sworn to eternal hatred of Rome. Under Hannibal's command, Carthage's influence in Spain surged. Cities fell, alliances were forged, and wealth poured in. But he wasn't content with defense. He sought a spark, a reason to strike. He found it in Saguntum, a Roman ally south of the Ebro River, within Carthage's sphere. When Hannibal besieged and sacked the city, he didn't just take its walls. He shattered the fragile peace. Rome, outraged, declared war. But Hannibal was already moving. From New Carthage, he set out not by sea, but overland. What followed would become legend. He crossed the Pyrenees, then the Rhone, then the unthinkable, the Alps. Snowstorms raged, cliffs crumbled, elephants and men alike froze or fell. But Hannibal pressed on. When he descended into Italy, he brought with him not just an army, but terror. The Romans expected him at sea. Instead, he emerged from the mountains like a storm. Battle after battle, he humiliated Rome. Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and then Cannae, a slaughter so complete, so surgical, that it remains one of the greatest tactical victories in military history. Entire Roman legions were encircled and annihilated. Senators died on the field. Rome trembled. But even victory brought uncertainty. Italy did not rise against Rome as Hannibal had hoped. The war would grind on. Blood would continue to spill. And Carthage, once again, had committed itself to a war that could end only in conquest or oblivion. For a moment, it seemed Rome might fall. Hannibal, the scourge of the Republic, stood triumphant on Italian soil. Roman legions lay broken, allies wavered. But what he could not conquer with steel, Rome reclaimed with endurance. As the years dragged on, Hannibal's brilliance began to wither in isolation. No reinforcements came. No Italian uprising rose. Rome, bloodied but unbroken, adapted, tightened its grip, changed its strategy, and struck back. The tide turned not in Italy, but in Spain. There, Rome took city after city, culminating in the capture of New Carthage, the jewel of the Iberian Peninsula. Then came a final blow. Hannibal's brother, Hasdrubal, marched from Spain to join him, but never arrived. The Romans ambushed him at the Metaurus River, destroyed his army, and cast his severed head into Hannibal's camp. The message was clear. No help was coming. Rome's vengeance was now in full motion. Scipio Africanus, young and ruthless, invaded Africa itself. Carthage panicked. Hannibal was recalled. After decades of war, the two titans met on the plains of Zama in 202 BC. There, Rome struck its final blow. Hannibal's army, outnumbered, outflanked, and betrayed by its former Numidian allies, collapsed under Roman steel. The peace that followed was not peace, it was punishment. Carthage lost all overseas holdings. Its warships were burned, its autonomy crippled. It could not wage war without Roman consent. And even then, only within Africa. Once a colossus of commerce and conquest, Carthage was reduced to a vassal, a ghost of its former glory. Yet Rome still watched nervously, unable to forget the fear Hannibal had inspired. The lion had been caged, but not yet killed. And deep within Carthage, the embers of defiance still smoldered, waiting for a final reckoning. Carthage had fallen, but not far enough. Though stripped of its empire, disarmed and humiliated, the city refused to die. Trade returned, markets buzzed, silver flowed once more through its ports. To the Romans, this was not recovery. It was rebellion waiting to happen. One man saw it clearer than all: Cato the Elder. After visiting Carthage in 150 BC, he returned to Rome with fire in his eyes and ash in his heart. From that day forward, he ended every speech with a chilling refrain: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. The pretext came quickly. Carthage, forbidden from waging war without Rome's consent, dared to defend itself from Numidian raids. That was all Rome needed. A massive invasion force, 80,000 Roman soldiers, landed in Africa, ready to finish what their fathers had begun. The siege lasted 3 years. Carthage fought with a fury born of desperation. Men, women, and even children labored night and day, reforging weapons from household tools, building walls within walls. Street by street, they resisted, burning, bleeding, refusing surrender. But Rome would not be denied. In 146 BC, Carthage fell. Its defenders were slaughtered or enslaved. The city was reduced to rubble and ash. According to legend, the ground was sown with salt, so that nothing would ever grow again. But fate writes in riddles. Exactly 146 years later, in AD 146, a boy was born, Septimius Severus, descendant of Carthaginian blood, who would one day rule as Emperor of Rome. Under his reign, temples to Baal, Tanit, and Punic gods rose in the heart of the empire. Rome had destroyed Carthage, but not its legacy. The Punic spirit endured for centuries, flickering through the ruins, whispering through time. The city burned, yes, but its memory would never be silenced. Carthage was gone, but not forgotten. The flames that devoured its temples and homes in 146 BC could not consume its memory. Rome had razed the city, enslaved its people, and scattered salt upon its soil. Yet what Carthage had built, its spirit, its culture, its gods, refused to die. Time, that silent conqueror, had something else in store. A century after the fall, Julius Caesar stood among the ruins. Where others saw ash, he saw opportunity. He ordered Carthage rebuilt, not as a rival, but as a Roman colony, reborn in stone and Latin. From its corpse rose a new city, forged in the image of its destroyer. But fate had one final twist. In AD 146, exactly 146 years after Carthage's fall, a boy named Septimius Severus was born in North Africa, of Punic blood. He would rise through the ranks of the Roman Empire and one day wear its crown. As emperor, Severus did the unthinkable. He honored Hannibal, the very man Rome once feared like a god of war. In the Roman Forum, temples to Baal Hamon and Tanit were raised, their symbols etched into the marble heart of the empire. Carthaginian deities now stood where senators once called for Carthage's annihilation. The gods of the vanquished, resurrected by the victor's hand. The Punic people lived on, in language, in customs, in the prayers whispered across North Africa. For centuries they endured, surviving Roman rule, Christianization, and conquest, until finally being absorbed by the Arab expansions of the 7th century. The Roman Carthage that rose from the ashes would endure for over 1,000 years, until the 13th century, when war would claim it once more. Cities fall, empires fade, but the story of Carthage lingers, etched in history, defiant, eternal. Empires fall, but memories linger. Though Rome reduced Carthage to ashes in 146 BC, it could not erase the soul of a civilization. From its scattered survivors rose whispers of a people too resilient to vanish. The Punic identity, scarred but alive, drifted across North Africa, surviving in quiet rituals, in language, in legend. A century later, Julius Caesar looked upon the ruins not with hatred, but with vision. He saw not an enemy, but a legacy worth reviving. On Carthage's scorched earth, a new city was born, Roman in law and language, but haunted by Punic ghosts. And though Rome claimed it as its own, echoes of the past remained, carried by the descendants of those who had once defied the Republic. Then, history circled back. In AD 146, exactly 146 years after Carthage's destruction, Septimius Severus was born. A son of North Africa, of Punic blood. He would rise to become Emperor of Rome, not only ruling its vast domains, but resurrecting its greatest former enemy, in spirit. Under his reign, temples to Baal Hamon and Tanit rose once more, not in Carthage, but in the heart of Rome itself. Where once the Senate demanded Carthage's death, its gods now stood in marble glory. For centuries more, the Punic flame flickered. Through Roman rule, Byzantine conquest, and Christian expansion. But time, relentless as ever, closed in. In the 7th century, Arab armies swept across North Africa, absorbing the last remnants of Punic life. Carthage changed hands again, no longer Punic, no longer Roman, but something new. And then, in the 13th century, amid the fires of Crusader conflict, the city fell one final time. The last stones crumbled, the last echo faded. Yet even in silence, Carthage endures, in ruins, in memory, in the ancient heartbeat of the Mediterranean. The story of Carthage is a powerful reminder that strength without unity and ambition without caution can lead to downfall. In today's world, whether in business, politics, or personal life, we must learn to adapt, to rebuild after failure, and to never underestimate the consequences of pride or vengeance. Like Carthage, we may face setbacks, but resilience and reinvention can pave the way forward. Respect your rivals, learn from your enemies, and never let past glory blind you to present dangers. Legacy isn't built on dominance. It's built on wisdom, humility, and the courage to rise again after the fall.